Every August, chain garden centers empty their vegetable aisles and roll in mums and pumpkins, and half the country assumes the growing season is basically over. It isn't. August is actually one of the two best planting windows of the entire year, and almost nobody tells you that, because there's no profit margin in a $2 seed packet in late summer. My grandmother ran a market garden for 31 years, and her second season beds outproduced her spring ones almost every year. Today, I'm walking you through the 15 vegetables you can still get in the ground right now for a real fall harvest. A few of these are going to surprise you. Number 4 is a root crop most people only think to plant in spring, and that's exactly why it does better in August. Number 9 is one my grandmother swore by, and it's almost never sold as a fall crop even though it's built for it. And the very last one on this list is the plant that convinced me August planting isn't a backup plan, it's the better plan. Let's get into it. Number 1. Bush beans, and specifically not the variety you planted in May. Botanically, Phaseolus vulgaris, reliable through zone 3 to 10 depending on your first frost date. But here's the part that matters more than zone. Bush beans mature in 50 to 55 days, which means an August 1st sowing gives you a harvest window in the 3rd week of September, right as the air cools and the pods stay tender longer instead of turning fibrous in summer heat. The insider mechanic: most people plant beans once in spring and never realize a second planting avoids the exact heat stress that makes June and July beans tough and stringy. Sow seed 1 inch deep, 2 inches apart, in rows spaced 18 inches. Do that, and in 6 weeks, you're eating beans that taste like the ones you remember from a garden, not a grocery store bag. Number 2. Bok Choy. The plant that basically refuses to grow well in spring, and nobody tells you why. Brassica rapa, hardy zones 2 through 11 as an annual, thrives specifically in the shortening daylight and cooling nights of August into October. In spring, bok choy bolts to seed almost the moment temperatures spike. In fall, that trigger never fires, so the plant just keeps building tight, glossy, pale green heads instead of throwing up a bitter flower stalk. Direct sow a 1/4 inch deep, 4 inches apart, and thin to 8 inches once seedlings have 2 true leaves. By late September, you'll have heads you can harvest whole or leaf by leaf for another month after that. Number 3. Carrots, and I mean a real fall sowing, not the leftover spring ones still in the ground. Daucus carota, zones 3 through 10, planted now for a late October to November harvest. Here's the mechanic almost nobody uses. Carrots sweeten dramatically after they've been through a light frost because the cold converts stored starches into sugar as a natural antifreeze response in the root. The carrots you pull in November will taste noticeably sweeter than anything you pulled in July. Sow seed a 1/2 inch deep in loose, stone-free soil and keep the bed consistently moist for the first 2 weeks. Carrot germination fails more from drying out than almost anything else. My grandmother used to lay a board over the row just to hold the moisture in. Do that, and by Thanksgiving, you'll have carrots sweet enough to eat raw off the counter. Number 4. Beets. The root crop everyone assumes is spring only, which is exactly why almost no one plants a fall crop and gets to eat their reward. Beta vulgaris, zones 2 through 10, days to maturity around 55 to 60, timed perfectly for an August sowing to finish before your ground freezes. The insider piece here is that beets planted for fall don't just give you the root. The greens stay tender and mild far longer than spring greens do because they never experience the bitter compounds that heat stress triggers. Sow a 1/2 inch deep, 3 inches apart, and thin ruthlessly to 4 inches once true leaves appear. Crowded beets stay small and woody. Get the spacing right, and you're harvesting both a sweet root and a genuinely good salad green off the same planting. That's the first 4. Up next, the crop my grandmother called her insurance plant, and the one almost every garden center gets wrong about timing. Number 5. Kale. but planted now, not in spring, which is the version almost nobody grows on purpose. Brassica oleracea, zones 2 through 11 as an annual, and this is one of the rare crops that actually improves after a hard frost instead of being damaged by one. Cold exposure triggers the plant to convert starches to sugars, the same antifreeze response as carrots. So an August-sown kale plant harvested in November tastes sweeter and less bitter than anything picked in July heat. Direct sow a 1/4 inch deep, 18 inches apart if you want full-size plants, or scattered tighter for baby leaf harvests every 2 weeks. Leave a few plants through a light snow if you're zone 6 or colder. You'll be shocked how good frost-kissed kale tastes compared to what you bought thinking it was a summer vegetable. Number 6. Napa Cabbage, the one restaurant cooks quietly grow at home and hardly anyone else bothers with. Brassica rapa subspecies pekinensis, zones 3 through 10, about 70 to 80 days to maturity, which puts an August 1st sowing right at the edge of a first frost in most zones. And that's intentional because Napa cabbage actually firms up its head in the final 2 weeks of cool weather. The mechanic here, unlike regular cabbage, Napa is far more forgiving of tight fall timelines because it doesn't need the long vernalization period spring planting requires. Space plants 12 inches apart in rows 18 inches apart, and keep soil evenly moist. Inconsistent watering is the #1 reason homegrown Napa splits before harvest. Nail the watering, and by late October, you've got heads that make store-bought Napa taste like styrofoam by comparison. Now, if you've stuck around this far, you already know more about fall planting than most people who've been gardening for a decade. Chain stores simply don't stock for this window, so this information isn't out there. If that's useful to you, subscribing means you won't miss the winter cold frame video I'm putting together next, which is the natural next step once you've got a fall garden going. Number 7. Radishes. Not the spring bunch you're used to, but a variety built for exactly this window. Raphanus sativus, zones 2 through 11. And here's the part almost no one uses. Radishes are one of the fastest crops in existence, 25 to 30 days from seed to harvest, which means you can sow a fresh batch every 10 days from now through mid-September and have a rolling harvest instead of one bunch that all matures at once. Sow seed a 1/2 inch deep, 2 inches apart, thinning to 2 inches. Tight spacing is the most common reason home radishes bulb small or not at all. Do a first sowing this week and you'll be pulling crisp, peppery radishes before the end of the month. Number 8. Spinach, the crop that actually prefers August sowing over spring, even though almost everyone plants it backwards. Spinacea oleracea, zones 2 through 9, and the mechanic is simple. Spinach bolts fast in the lengthening days and rising heat of late spring, but an August sowing hits shortening days and cooling nights, which is precisely the environment spinach evolved to thrive in. Sow a 1/2 inch deep, 2 inches apart, and don't skip a light mulch layer. It keeps the soil temperature low enough for reliable germination, which is the single biggest failure point for late summer spinach. Get germination right, and you'll be harvesting tender leaves well into November, in some zones straight through a snow cover. Before we get to the back half of this list, where things get genuinely interesting, I'd love to know, what zone are you in, and which of these have you already got going? Drop it in the comments. I read every one, and it actually helps me figure out which of these crops perform best where, since USDA zones only tell half the story. Number 9. Garlic. And yes, this is the one I mentioned at the start, the crop my grandmother called her insurance plant. Allium sativum, zones 3 through 9 for fall planting, and technically most guides tell you to wait until October, but here's what almost nobody explains. If you're in a warmer zone, 7 or higher, an August start on soft neck varieties gives roots extra time to establish before any cold snap, which means noticeably larger bulbs by the following July. The mechanic that makes this insurance is simple. Garlic planted now sits quietly through fall, roots down deep, and needs almost nothing from you until spring. Break bulbs into individual cloves, plant pointy end up, 2 inches deep, 6 inches apart. My grandmother planted a full bed every August without fail, rain or shine, because she said it was the one crop that rewarded you a full year later for 15 minutes of work today. She was right. I've never had a bad garlic harvest off an August planting. Number 10. Swiss chard, the plant everyone treats as a spring-only crop, despite it being one of the most cold-tolerant vegetables you can grow. Beta vulgaris subspecies vulgaris, zones 2 through 11, 50 to 60 days to maturity, and chard sown in August will often keep producing leaves right up until a hard freeze, sometimes surviving light snow entirely intact under a row cover. The insider piece is, unlike lettuce or spinach, chard doesn't get bitter or tough as temperatures drop. The leaves actually stay glossy and the stems stay crisp, well past what most people assume is done. Sow a ½ inch deep, 4 inches apart, thinning to 12 inches for full-sized plants. Harvest outer leaves only, and the plant keeps producing new growth from the center for months. Quick reminder before we keep going, the plant I mentioned at the very start, the one that changed how I think about August planting entirely, is still coming. It's not one you'd expect to see on a plant now list at all, and it's near the very end for a reason. Number 11. Turnips. Genuinely one of the most underrated vegetables in American gardens, and almost entirely because of bad childhood associations with tough, bitter spring turnips. Brassica rapa, zones 2 through 9, 40 to 60 days, depending on whether you're harvesting for greens or roots. The mechanic here is the same frost sweetening effect you've heard a few times already on this list, but turnips respond to it more dramatically than almost anything else. A turnip pulled after frost is a completely different vegetable from one pulled in July heat, mild and almost sweet instead of sharp and woody. Sow a ½ inch deep, 1 inch apart, thin to 4 inches for roots, or leave tighter if you're growing primarily for the greens. Most people who say they hate turnips have simply never eaten one grown this way. If any of this has been useful so far, this is a good spot to send it to whoever you know that's already decided their garden is done for the year. This list alone could change their whole fall. Number 12. Collard greens, a plant most modern gardeners skip entirely, which is a mistake, because collards are quietly one of the most cold-hardy vegetables that exist. Brassica olearia var. Acephala, zones 6 through 11, 60 to 75 days to maturity. And unlike almost everything else on this list, collards don't just tolerate frost, they actively need it. The leaves stay tough and slightly bitter until temperatures drop, and only then do they turn tender and deeply flavorful. Space plants 18 inches apart in rows 2 feet apart, and don't harvest until after your first frost if you can help it. A collard patch planted in August and harvested in November will still be producing usable leaves through most of a mild winter, which means one August planting can feed you for 4 months. Number 13. Leeks, the plant that separates a garden you tend for one season from one you tend for years. Allium porum, zones 3 through 9. And here's the part that changes how people think about them. Leeks planted in August, if left in the ground and mulched heavily, can overwinter in zones 6 and warmer and be harvested fresh in the dead of winter or very early spring, when almost nothing else in the garden is producing anything at all. Plant transplants or thinned seedlings 6 inches apart in trenches 4 to 6 inches deep, filling in gradually as they grow to blanch the stem. This isn't a plant that rewards you in 6 weeks, it's a plant that rewards you in February, when you'd forgotten you even had anything left out there. Number 14. Asparagus crowns. And I know this one breaks the pattern of everything else on this list, because you won't eat a single spear this year or even next year. Asparagus officinalis, zones 3 through 8, And late summer is actually an accepted secondary planting window in milder climates, letting crowns establish root systems before dormancy, so they emerge stronger the following spring. This is the plant that stops being about this season's harvest and starts being about the next 20. An asparagus bed planted correctly will produce for 2 to 3 decades. Dig trenches 8 inches deep, set crowns 12 to 18 inches apart, cover with 2 inches of soil, and fill the trench in gradually as shoots emerge over the following weeks. You won't harvest a full crop until year 3, but in year 7, year 15, year 20, that bed is still feeding you every spring, long after almost every other plant on this list has come and gone through a dozen more cycles. Number 15, and this is the one I told you about at the very start, the plant that convinced me August isn't a backup planting window, it's the better one. Rhubarb, Rheum rhubarbarum, zones 3 through 8. And technically most guides tell you to plant divisions in spring, but an August planting, done right, gives the crown an entire fall season to establish a root system undisturbed by the stress of also trying to push top growth, which means a noticeably stronger plant by the time it breaks dormancy the following April. Plant crowns with the growth buds 2 inches below the soil surface, spaced 3 to 4 feet apart because rhubarb gets enormous. You won't harvest at all this first year, and you shouldn't touch it the second year either. But rhubarb is a plant that once established will come back reliably for a decade or more, asking almost nothing of you, in a bed my grandmother never once had to replant in the 31 years she gardened. That's the version of a garden this whole list is really about. Not just what you can eat by October, but what you're setting up to still be pulling out of the ground years from now, long after you've forgotten you ever planted it in August at all. So, of everything on this list, which one are you planting first? Tell me your zone and I'll tell you if I'd start with something else instead.